meters, which is negligible. The front eaves will increase by 1 metre and not the stated 2.3 metres. This was probably a typing error, but must be acknowledged as it could be very misleading in relation to the extent of change to the building. The Parish Council fully support the application. There are no issues that cause any detriment to neighbours. The most damaging visual impact upon the listed building is the timber yard and large industrial sheds at the rear of the boundary. This proposal will go some way to block some of those unsightly sheds out and will actually improve the visual setting of the house. The garage and proposed annex are set back behind the rear elevation of the main house. The physical relationship between the western end of the garage and the house will be maintained. The main house will remain the most imposing building on the street scene. This extension will represent no harm to the setting of the main house and will have no detrimental impact upon the street scene. Could members please give positive consideration to this proposal?
Thank you very much. Members, any comments? Councillor Slocum.
Could we see a picture again of the main house, Woodland House? So that hasn't got any windows in the eaves. Can you go back to the plan again? So this would still be garages underneath. So what is the nature of those windows in the eaves? What is that for?
So that's for the first floor annex accommodation.
What I wanted to say was, I'm inclined to think that it looks, the actual new application looks more attractive than those garages. Now, that's what I was trying to say. Rather than the garage, to me, without being rude, looked a bit ugly compared to the lovely house. So, yeah. Okay, I'll just wait a little bit.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
watching a film.
Does anybody else have any sort of comments to make whilst we're waiting to resume? Oh, there we go. Councillor Bolt.
I'll try to speak up.
Thank you.
Policy D26 has been voted in this to do with heritage asset. It does go on to say it will encourage proposals that make positive contribution to the conservation of heritage assets and their setting. And I agree with Councillor Slocum. So what's there now just looks like a strange garage block. This proposal seems to be making it a lot more keeping. Now, I've just been looking here to see about the outside of the building, how it will be finished. That would be sympathetic should it be going through in material wise, so that it does stay in window wise and everything else with the original building. I gather that hasn't, so I'm listening through this now.
So I understand it's going to be finished in matching materials. If there's a concern about the windows, then that's always something we could condition in terms of having details of that to come forward. But the plans, in terms of the material finishes, that's render and slate grey roof tile.
Windows would be similar to looking at this on the original building, the heritage assets. I gather that is wooden still.
I imagine so. I don't know.
I can't quite make it out from the picture. That be something that can be conditioned.
I mean, we can certainly attach, if members were minded to approve, we can certainly, there would certainly, and because it's building within the setting of a listed building, we'd almost certainly need to agree conditions and that would secure matters such as materials and window detailing, for example. So if that's the way you want to go, then yes.
And we would be able to condition that there would be only usage for the occupants, residents of that house, rather than turn it into a holiday deck.
We certainly could put a ancillary condition on if that was needed, so that that was its only function.
Councillor Slocum.
what with the condition of the render being the same, matching the house, with the windows being as near to the main house, with it being an ancillary building to the house, I think that, I'd be very satisfied to move the recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Stella. Yeah. Mr Kitchener.
Obviously hearing that from councillor Stoker, just in terms of sort of the context of the way we've had to look at the application and the advice we've given, and just to make sure that everyone's aware of how we have to do this, because it's not like an ancillary building to any other dwelling. It is a listed building, so it does affect that we have had to take a slightly different approach, and that's kind of led us to where we've got to. So I just thought it might be helpful to go over what national policy says we should be doing. So it talks about great weight should be given to the assets conservation where we have listed buildings, and it talks about if there's any harm to a listed building, that should require clear and convincing justification. And it also says, in further that where it would lead to what was called less than substantial harm, so that harm should be weighed against any public benefits. And this is and that's the advice we've been given by our conservation officer, that he is identifying harm with the scheme, and that is because of the eaves heights are going up, the building is getting wider, and he's concerned about its relationship at the moment. So what we are being told is that there is harm, and it would therefore, where there is harm, it would be our role to weigh it against any public benefit. Now, there is no, in this case, it wouldn't necessarily be any public benefit, because actually the benefit is just to a private individual. It's not like doing something that is in it that has a other benefit. Now, maybe members feel that actually there isn't harm and come to a different view from the conservation officer, and actually say, we've taken a look at the scheme, we don't believe there is any harm, and therefore we are satisfied that actually the relationship with the listed building is okay, and then we want to grant. But just in terms of the advice we're being given, it is that there is some harm identified from the scale of the proposal, and therefore that's led us to say that it should be reviewed. And I think our discussions with the agent was that, like, we didn't feel that there was no scheme that was supportable here. There is a version scheme that's about getting the proportions and the scale right, and that presents some challenges. But there probably are other ways to do it. You know, whether actually, because the windows are quite large for a quite small building, and whether there is scope to keep the eaves height a bit lower. We felt there were further options that could have been considered, but members will come to their own views. But that's how we've got to where we are with our recommendation.
Councillor Ferguson, councillor Grimes, and then councillor Bradford.
Just quickly to echo what my fellow councillors said, if the value judgment we're making is based on harm, I don't see, especially if we extend conditions to the nature of windows, for example, like that this application is causing harm in any real way to the building. So I completely accept it's got a vague value judgment to make. So conditions on windows, etc., might have to reach some kind of compromise with what advice we can give. But in principle, I support.
In fact, are you saying you second it or
Yeah,
just
I'll
support? Councillor Grimes.
Oh dear. I'm sorry, I'm not of the same mind. I think, yes, this application is better than the last one, but I still don't think it's right. It does not look right against the background of a Georgian house. I'm sorry, but I can't vote for this because I just don't think it looks right. I'm sure that something better could be done. I mean, that looks awful like it is now, but I think this newer application looks better, but I still don't think it looks right. And I can see where the conservation officer is coming from on this. So I can't support this application as it stands at the moment. So I'm not happy with it. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Grimes, councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Grimes just said, actually. If by talking the planning officers and the agent can talk their way into something a little bit different, so it does look a little bit better, I think that's the way forward. And I wouldn't be able to support things as it is today, but I feel there's a way forward, so we're not being negative, right? That's all I'm gonna say, right?
So can I ask advice on the way forward in terms of members who are inclined to support? Can you please, you've probably said this already, but just reiterate conditions that could be placed on such recommendations, just so that we're all clear as to what can be achieved and what can't, and that will affect how members will wish to vote, I'm sure.
So I certainly would have thought three conditions would have been necessary, which is details of the windows, details of the materials, and the ancillary condition that it should be used as an annex only to the main house and not for any other purpose. I think for any members persuaded to consider refusing the application, I think the one thing we would say in their benefit is this is the applicant's first go. They would be entitled to a 3-go application if they came in within 12 months with an alternative scheme. So there wouldn't be any charge for that if they went on that.
So given that information, so far, oh, sorry. Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
Just if, I think the motion on the table is go contrary to the opposite recommendations. I think it's been seconded, so you need to take note of that.
Yeah.
I think you just need, because wherever you're overturning officers or minded to overturn officers, you need to sort of state a reason why you are, you're minded to go that way, which would appear to be a sort of reverse of the recommendation. In that I think what you're saying is that the detailing would not harm the setting of the listed building. I think probably the proposer needs to just sort of confirm that is why they're taking this way.
Yes, yes, they come.
Chairman, yeah, I mean, excuse me. I think it matches D2, promoting high quality exclusive design. I think that with those added conditions that Liam just said previously, that Mr. Evans said previously, I would like to add those to it, if it's possible. There's a little tweaking there, but if we could add those conditions to it, then I think that would be perfect. So Dean, sorry, Dean. Sorry, Dean, I apologise. Sorry, Mr. Titchin, I'm sorry. But what you said was, I think with your conditions added to our proposal of promoting high quality inclusive design, I think added together, we're not disputing what you're saying, absolutely not, but we're adding that. I think it's definitely better than that. Does that make sense, or?
So that would be to propose to grant permission with the conditions subject to details of windows, materials being appropriate to the setting of the listed property, plus a condition around it remaining ancillary to its use remaining ancillary to the main building.
And the render matching.
And the render matching.
That would be controlled by the materials condition.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Councillor Ferguson, the seconder of this recommendation, are you happy with that? Okay, so we have a proposer and a seconder as stated. All those in favour, please show.
All in favour.
Thank you.
Sorry. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favour. Sorry.
5 in favour. Those against.
1, 2, 3, 4 against.
Any abstentions?
And 1 abstention.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, that is carried as proposed. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we now go on to application number 8 on the agenda, page 63 of your report, and that is the application regarding land to the west of Townsend in Avon. Mr. News presenting.
Right, thank you, Chairman. This is an outline application with access to be considered now, with all other matters reserved for a pair of self-built dwellings. So there is the site indicated to the north of the main body of the village, on the west side of the road, just near that junction with the road that takes you down to the Aller Road. So in more detail, approximately, to my best of my IT abilities, it's a rectangle around the site to indicate it's not actually accurately the site, which you'll see from the red line plan. But the site there is to the north of the field. The field to the south, there has been one permission granted. The house is newly built for a self-built dwelling, but that's at the southern side of that site. So there is the accurate red line. Apologies to the applicant. Just doing my best on the overhead, the map. But the application includes the access from the main road, and then the blue line shows that they own land to the north and the rest of the field to the rear of the site. So the current site currently is just a field with a field entrance, as indicated there, through the hedge with some sort of scrubby trees in there. And then the proposal with an indicative layout shows how two dwellings could be accommodated, but the point of access, detailed permission is sought for. So stood at the gate looking to the south there with the solar panels about to be installed is the house that has been approved and built there. On the southern side of that adjoining field, handing the camera around, looking west, and to the north we just have a flat field laid to pasture with some horses. Stood across the other side of the road, just looking at the entrance there through the field gate. So I stood with my back. I stood in the entrance to the property opposite, and that's the Aller Road in the foreground. Just stood in the entrance looking south. You can see there's a speed camera there, never an indication of a good road situation. And then sort of the main body of the village down through there. There are no pavements here until you get down. I've got some photographs coming, but yeah, there are, you see a couple of parked cars there. That's cursor to a field screen. But can't you see that there's a black van parked there? That's the nearest bit of pavement. And then just stood looking to the north there, and then you can see that we're just short of the junction where the road goes off through Middlesway, West of Doyland, and towards Bridgewater, or straight on towards Glastonbury. Opposite side of the road, looking south again, just to give you a sort of flavour of the junction. Whilst I was there yesterday afternoon, it was about 3:30 time. It was quite busy. There were times when there was less traffic, but I accept that this photograph does show quite busy. And then just stood just next to the speed camera, looking south. See down there, the footpaths haven't started yet. Looking back at the junction there, that's the Aller Road off to the right. The silver car parked here, that marks the entrance. And then just a bit further there, just to give you a flavour of road conditions. Looking back towards the site, the new house on the left there. And then stood back down in the village, or the edge of the village, looking north.
The pavement starts just behind me. There's this little sort of parking area where that silver car is parked. So this is the nearest bit of pavement. Light is around there, just about see the corner of the silver car. So in terms of the issues, we are outside the settlement boundary. It's a tier 4 settlement. We can support development for self-build under policies T4 and D9, D9 being the self-build policies, for development that is outside and well related to the settlement boundary. In this instance, we think this is a sort of, this site has jumped over a clear development opportunity in the adjoining site. We do not consider it to be well related to the settlement boundary. We accept the first house that was approved. This one is now felt to be, this pair of houses felt to be too far out, so that it is not well related. Also of crucial concern here is the nature of that access. The highways officer has objected to it. We are at a very sort of busy bit of the road. There is the Aller junction, there's a speed camera indicative of a problem. And the curvature of the road is such that, the visibility is not the best. So from that point of view, we suggest there is a reason for refusal as well as the point of location. And then the third reason for refusal before you, we're concerned here that there are no safe pedestrian links to the main body of the village. I did see one dog and small child. I felt nervous when I watched them walking up there, but that was my perception of the traffic junction, at the time. But obviously a local resident felt it was safe to walk, and they did. So I'll throw that in there. However, in terms of our policies, we say that it's contrary to policy D14. So for the 3 reasons set out in the report, the recommendation is of refusal.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. We have 3 speakers on this application. The first one I'd like to call is Mr. Betty. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Nice to be back.
Thank you. As you know, 3 minutes from whenever you'd like to start.
Chairman and members, thank you for allowing me to speak today in favour of this application. Mr. Natara and Ms. Pavey are both local residents of Overy and are fully involved in village life, regularly taking part in village events. This application today supports policy CO1, T4 and D9, as there is a pattern of growth along this side of the road, with the neighbouring field recently being granted planning permission for a self-build, so that these houses will be integrated with the building line. Policy D19 is met on this application, as the dwellings won't be seen by neighbours or from the road due to the established hedgerows. Policy D14 is also met, as there is a safe route of access for pedestrians, people with disabilities and cyclists. Although not an approved footpath, there is a wide enough verge for pedestrians and wheelchair users to remain off the highway to get from the site to the village. As Mr. Noon said, there are residents already in the village that do use this footpath, or that, as you can see on the picture there, down to the village. So you can remain off the road to get right into the village. I request that today that we use common sense and approve this application and keep 2 well-integrated families in the village that regularly support the village. And that's all I have today. Be short and sweet.
Thank you. I'd now like to call Councillor Tizard, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today on this one.
And 3 minutes from whenever you like to start.
I am the Overy Parish Councillor Chair of our Parish Council, who voted unanimously to support this application in the knowledge of all the points that have been raised here. We were cognizant of the entrance exit to this, and like many villages who are struggling for space to build, sometimes we have to look pragmatically at the policies. We do believe that this application complies with policy D14 and is within the adopted 2011-32 plan. The applicant did commission an independent specialist traffic report, which actually showed nothing to the detriment of the application. And although it looks very busy, and there are times when it is busy out there, this can be a very quiet road. The development site is well within the 30 mph speed restriction of the village, and it is opposite the speed camera, but this is a very controlled speeded area. The proposed access point, which much has been made of, is actually the retention of a historic gateway, which has been in use since the 1840s, as been shown on the tide map. So we're talking nearly 200 years of use. What we do find is that at the moment, the access point is used by the applicants for farm machinery, horse box, animals, and vehicles with trailers. So we are not changing the use of it, and the proposal isn't. In fact, I would say if you are here mindful to approve this, it would vastly improve the safety of it, because farm access vehicles would not be using it. The proposal also includes a footpath along the area you saw along the verge. Of the two applicants, Helen Pavey has resided in Oathry for over 30 years, and as Anthony Betty said, she is very active in the village. She owns the proposed land and adjoining fields as has been outlined. She maintains the land and its boundaries on her own for the provision of hay and pasturing for her horses. Helen is a highly successful eventer, competing most weekends and training. Her horses are valued at nearly £100,000. Now, rural crime as it is a consideration, and she is not prepared to leave the horses overnight alone, and this would satisfy us. With result, she has to move the horses along the A361 in darkness, on her own, in inclement weather, to the site in the fields you've seen, which would be obviously change if in fact this application improves. So I would see this as a very positive improvement for the safety in the village, and it would be one which actually would help enormously with the retention of people in the village who are villagers, and it would allow us to maintain our rural agricultural way of life. I appreciate the time to speak.
Thank you. Final speaker on this application is Mr. Lillycrop, please. Again, 3 minutes from whenever you start.
The progressive and positive self-build policy enables homeowners the opportunity to remain in their community and contribute to the sustainability of village life. This application is such an opportunity for two Oathry families who embrace the positive nature of the self-build policy. Officers have, however, reported 3 areas of concern. Firstly, the site is not considered by them to be well related to the village. Officers have historically advised me on how they judge well related, and to quote, "When leaving a village, if you reach the end of the housing and you clearly enter open countryside and there is a good perceptible space before a proposed dwelling, it is not considered well related." This is not the case with my client's site. When leaving Oathry along the A361, the housing to the east extends right up to the northern boundary of the application site. Furthermore, as you've seen, a self-built house is currently under construction adjacent to my client's site. It is clearly evident that the proposed dwellings will be very well related to the settlement. Secondly, a lack of safe pedestrian access to the village. I need to point out that the site plan being presented to you on your screens is out of date and could be misleading. The actual site plan with officers clearly indicates a new footpath across the whole of the site frontage, extending across the site of the adjacent dwelling under construction back to Bedwell Lane. This path will also benefit the occupants of the existing dwellings opposite my client's site. This will be a safety improvement. Thirdly, highway safety. The site will use an existing agricultural access which is well set back from the highway. Paul Lacey, a reputed highway consultant, was engaged to assess the County Highway Officer's objections. His qualified report does not appear to have been duly considered. His report states the intensification of the use of this access will be relatively minor. The proposed 60-metre visibility is in excess of the required 43. Data shows that there has only been one minor injury accident at any of these junctions of the A361 and 372 in the past 5 years. Following detailed highway analysis, In his view, the evidence does not confirm the entrance will be prejudicial to highway safety. To conclude, the application meets the criteria of the self-build policy. The site is well related to the settlement of Othery and will not prejudice highway safety. The proposed footpath will improve pedestrian safety for all. The parish council, as you're aware, support this proposal unanimously. My clients ask that members look positively at this opportunity for them to build their own home in their community.
Thank you very much. Officers, is there anything you wish to come back on or from any of those presentations?
Apologies if we have got this plan is out of date. It's not been superseded on our system. Although Dean has found an email with the plan you refer to, it does rely, it's marked up indicatively. It does rely on land that is outside, I believe, the applicant's red line. So it would require land down through here to provide a footpath on. Indicatively, it's shown. I don't know, unfortunately, the extent of any discussions that were made that were held in relation to that plan. It could only get the pavement, provide a pavement across the adjoining site. There is still no pavement in this relatively narrow section immediately to the south of the speed camera, although there is a verge you can walk on, but certainly on the east side, that is very, very narrow. That's a pinch point. So I don't think it goes all the way, to addressing that concern. Just in terms of the points that were made about one of the applicants with the horses, that's not really an argument in favour of this application, in that we're considering under the, whether or not it's appropriate location for self-build, not on the basis of a rural workers dwelling to meet some sort of need of a countryside function. So I would suggest you need to disregard that. In terms of the nature of the access that is proposed, obviously at the moment, the activities in and out of that field, they may be the odd day or seasonally when it's busier, but in terms of the consistent level of use, a dwelling typically creates 6 to 8 movements per day in terms of comings and goings. That's the sort of highways, what highways sort of look at these things on. So that is, I would suggest, a significantly greater increase when sort of averaged out over the year. I'm not entirely sure how the remainder of that field would be accessed if this was done. There don't appear to be any other field entrances, certainly off here, whether or not there, an access will be maintained through the development site, or whether there's an access from the south. That's not clear. So it's not clear that all equestrian or agricultural use would cease through this site, because it's just not clear where that would be replaced. So I think sort of a degree of caution on that sort of point, that it would automatically be less than that currently goes in and out.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. Members, Councillor Bradford indicated.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There's clearly a lot of things that don't seem to be quite review. I suppose my common sense view would be to take this away, have a chat away, and bring it back again to another planning effort. But I'm going to say a few things about it. It would appear that an adjacent site that was brought into the question this afternoon, and also pedestrian links. Is there or isn't there? It'd be nice to know exactly what is happening. And just for the record, I understand a firm called Grassroots have put in a planning application not too far from this for some nearly 50 dwellings in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Am I right in saying that? And they will be using this particular junction for access, etc. It's not very far away from this. But so I have to be honest and say what I thought. D19, D14, well covered. But what I said in the first place, there's a lot of ifs and a lot of maybes. I think the two people need to talk again, take it back to Othery Parish Council, who fully supported it. They fully supported it. So probably they go back again and they would support it again. But when you come here, you've got to be a little bit clearer and we can put our hands up and say, and be hand on heart and say, you're doing a good job. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry, I keep saying Mr., but Madam, sorry.
Councillor Bolt, then Councillor Munt.
With regards to us not having access, I was just going to put it in with regards to us not having any access to the plan, the updated plan. I'm just wondering if this is something that we might find deferring so that it can be brought back to us. Is that clarified?
Would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think possibly that would be a good idea out of fairness to the applicant to give them a fair crack of the whip. If there are some drawings in here that haven't been out, so I think that the one I've seen would probably require reconsultations properly to bring it back. So yes, I think deferral would allow us to explore some of these issues.
And so I think in that case, if there's just those questions to ask, and of course we can't ask them because they've not been presented with regards, and we don't have the updated plan.
I propose a deferral, Madam Chairman.
Okay, both Councillor Munt.
No, I was going to suggest the same. They look like these could answer quite a lot of questions that so I'd have to say deferral.
Okay, so we have a proposer, Councillor Bradford, proposing a deferral due to lack of clarity over highways access issues. And that's seconded by, well, it's been seconded by Councillor Munt.
In that period of time, it might be an idea if the planning committee went and had a look themselves and they can tell then and come straight back here with a good mind, clear mind, etc.
So are you proposing a site visit?
Well, a private one, and I'm not the whole committee. Well, you said you can't with all things in life, but I do it.
So we're proposing deferral, subject to further discussions and clarity about the highways.
Yeah, I think it would be at least 2 cycles because the plan I think is substantially different to the one that we have as the current plan on the system to trigger a reconsultation round.
Okay. Right, so all those in favour of a deferral, please show. Unanimous. Thank you all. And so that brings us to the final application for this afternoon, and that is for Sunnyside Bungalow at Hawthorns, Buxton. Hi, Mr. Evans, if you'd like to take us through it, please.
No problem, thanks, Chair. This application follows on from an outline application which was granted by committee, I think at the final Sedgemoor committee. So we have the reserve matters application submitted for the erection of one dwelling to the north of Hawthorns. The site itself, as I said, has been granted outline consent. It's in the development boundaries of the village, and the application is seeking the erection of a 1.5-storey dwelling adjacent to the existing property known as Sunnyside. So the application site plan is on the screen now. It's fairly consistent with what the outline indicative plan showed us at the time. So we have the access, which was approved in the reserve matter stage, coming off Challenge Lane, leading to a parking turning area. A new feature of this scheme is the erection of a timber framed carport, which will provide sheltered parking from the property, with the dwelling located here. So the application seeks consent for a cottage style 1.5-storey dwelling, finished in render and brickwork with a tiled roof. The front elevation is located here, with the rear elevation containing a 1.5-storey projection at the back and a single-storey projection to the side. The property itself will contain bedrooms to the first floor and segregated lounge, kitchen, dining areas to the ground floor. This is the outline plan, which was granted consent in March. I put this on the screen just to refer members to a late response we've had from the parish council. Unfortunately, they couldn't attend today's meeting, but in response to the applications committee report going on the agenda this month, they have refuted claims that their impression of the application site was that, well, the report states that the application that was granted consent at the outline stage indicated that the existing property, Sunside Bungalow, would be retained as part of the scheme overall. So I put this up on the screen just to indicate that what we had before us at the time was a plan showing a detached dwelling located to the northeast of Sunnyside Bungalow, which is located here. As officers, we have no indication that the application was for the replacement of Sunnyside Bungalow. So the parish council have stated that the planning reasons behind their objection was to this application have already been documented. They refute the claims that the report that the application was never for the replacement of the existing bungalow. At their February parish council meeting, the applicant, in response to a specific question from the chairman, stated that the existing bungalow would be demolished. Further, if we refer back to the outline application, also no sign bungalow, the number of existing units on the site is given as 0, and the total proposed residential units as 1, whereas in fact these numbers should have read 1 and 2 respectively. The application was therefore factually incorrect and misleading, with the error further compounded by the applicant's verbal assurance that the bungalow would be demolished. The application form submitted at the time did indicate that there were no existing dwellings on the site. The application site itself is indicated by the red line, so we don't actually have a building there at the moment within the red line area. So as far as the forms were concerned and the plan submitted, this was in fact correct. Sunnyside Bungalow falls outside the application red line area and therefore would not have been included as part of the existing and proposed number of dwellings as indicated on the forms. So I will go back to the site plan for the proposed residential reserve matters application. But as I said, this is fairly consistent with the outline application. It does indicate a new dwelling within the development boundary adjacent to Sunnyside Bungalow rather than replacing it. And as I said, this is consistent with the outline application which was granted by committee some months back. So having addressed that, we'll just take a look at the application site. So these are some updated photographs of the current situation on site at the moment. The previous application, the outline application, was submitted following some on-site works that took place. These were investigated through enforcement, but as you can see, the application site started to grow back. The plan that's been submitted at the reserve matter stage now, again, reiterates the outline proposal to relocate the existing hedgerow further back to provide visibility displays along Garnage Lane, which is not well trafficked given the sparse nature of the edge of the settlement. So this is the view looking back towards Sunnyside Bungalow behind the hedgerow here, looking towards the southwest. The proposed dwelling will be sit inside the plot here. The site itself is considered to be a suitable site to take the dwelling without the period crown or contrite. The existing garden space, which this photograph is taken from, is quite large in area and will be able to provide amenity spaces for both existing and proposed dwellings. There will be no impact on residential amenity of knowing overlooking towards to Sunnyside Bungalow, while further northeast there will be no other existing properties in the area that will be affected by the development. The design and materials are considered to be appropriate, given the vernacular of this local area. While there are bungalows, mainly bungalows on the street, scene is considered the design itself is acceptable, eventually improvement on what was already there as part of the challenge for HVC. So in terms of the key issues, the site is subject to an outline planning permission for one dwelling. The dwelling itself that's being proposed now is consistent with that layout, which was indicative at the time, but it's considered to be a very suitable layout and represents, respects the character and built form of the settlement. It will provide many spaces for both existing and proposed with no impact on residential amenity, and the access, which was approved at the time of the outline, is consistent with what we had then. So the actual application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Benson, just in time. If you'd like to come forward, and you have the usual 3 minutes when you're ready.
I didn't expect you to get through it so quickly today, but there we go. Thank you for your time. I won't take up too much of your time. I think Mr. Evans has covered it all pretty well. As you rightly said, and members will probably remember granting outline permission only a few months ago on the site. So we've obviously taken on board comments that were raised at that point. Come up with a design that I think will fit in pretty well with the street scene, really. Highways got no issues, no flood risk issues. Mr. Evans has explained the situation with regard to the amenity space. So yeah, I won't take up too much more of your time. I think it sort of accords with all the policies that we need to. So you'll follow Mr. Evans' recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Slocum.
Yeah, I think this is a really attractive design, very in keeping with the area. I think it's really, really attractive. I can see no issue at all, so I would like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford.
I'll second that, Madam Chairman.
Okay, so we have,
Here for all the rules, cycling. People are talking, this is the important one to talk, and you come into the planning as well.
okay, thank you. Councillor Munn.
Sorry, just to be absolutely clear, the reason it's here was because there was a misunderstanding between the parish council and that was the only reason.
Okay, that's great. I think when you see this photograph of the state of the bungalow, I think maybe that the replacement on that, I think that's better.
But that was their objection.
Copy that.
And it came before the committee because ward members wished to be debated. Okay, any other comments? We have a proposer and a seconder to approve the grant the officer's recommendation to grant permission. All those in favour, please show. It is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so we go to the final item on the agenda, which is the information sheets. So if officers want to say anything about this, or
No, I don't. Yeah, so agenda's all over. My agenda, unfortunately, the first one is appeals received. So there is one in relation to a couple of self-built cheddar. Another two appeals there. I don't know if anyone's got any queries about that. A dwelling in Bridgewater to Morley Road, delegated decisions. Signage for a very large poster, Old Taunton Road, Bridgewater. Certificate of lawfulness, business use, storage yard at Chelsea.
just like to, sorry, I thought it was unusual that there was an appeal on a permission that we granted, but that was the one at Wendon.
That's it.
The dog training, but that the appeal is around the hours of operation.
That's it, yes. So that's the last one on the list. Yes, they didn't like that time limitation, so that you have the right of appeal. Is that correct, Liam?
It was around
Yes.
sets out how many movements
Okay, thank you. So, any comments from members on appeals decided?
Those are the received ones, and then
That's all straightforward, isn't it?
So-
Really?
yeah, and then we've had a couple of appeals that we've received. One allowed. About that, but I do at Bradley Stream Wood for Shepherd's Hut as an agricultural workers' welfare.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very small application delegated, related to a very small sort of agricultural operation that we didn't consider there to be the scale to justify it, but they, I believe, the inspector felt the other way, so granted on that. So a very very small scale permission. We've also, so that one was allowed. We had one dismissed at 8 Walnut Drive, which was about an extension in an existing residential area, sort of a concern about its impact on a footpath and it getting too close. So the inspector had gone with us, and that one was dismissed. We had another one which we lost, unfortunately, at 12 Peachtree Close in Bridgewater. It's quite an unneighbourly sort of development where someone had erected a fence between 2 double garages. One neighbour had one double garage, one had the other. They didn't really get on. Someone put a fence right down the middle. One neighbour couldn't really get in their car. We didn't rebuild it because it was something we could support. The inspector went the other way. A bit of a shame, really. I can't imagine those neighbours getting on.
What reasons?
I might be able to check.
I think I remember that one. I think the inspector went down the route of highway safety or visual impact. You imagine sort of the shared building, this double garage, and in front of it are 2 end-on parking spaces. It's sort of 1 and a bit metre high fence in between those 2 parking spaces on the road. So from visual amenity, highway safety, I'm happy with it. Perhaps if we pay. That's,
In terms of the area that you weren't allowed to put railings up or
and that
something
was
in
why
that
the
street.
application was needed.
Yeah.
So we reviewed it. It was really, I think, possibly something. The issue of neighbourhood amenity, you put in something that causes such aggro agreement between neighbours. Sometimes you can argue that point. But it's not promoted through neighbourhood, but the inspector pick up on that for themselves. I'm very glad that. Yeah, I'm glad to have it. I think the effectiveness. Like that one. Issue. The other one.
We had an appeal dismissed, so they went with us on some solar panels on the roof of the door. How to go first?
That was, yes, setting of listed building. Quite a sizable garage that they were retrofitting. So the panel to, because of where the garage was, right at the entrance to listed buildings, I think that it was setting on.
And then just after that, we had another appeal dismissed at Sycamore Farm in Shipham for 1 dwelling. So the inspector went with us on that. We'd already previously refused 2 dwellings on that site, and that the appellant had a appeal dismissed for it just being too tight up to the backs of some other existing properties. The scheme they came in for 1 dwelling was pretty much the same distance. We went with the same recommendation. The inspector supported us on that one. And then when we had one at another one where someone wanted to retain a temporary agricultural workers caravan as a self-contained tourism unit, so when we grant temporary agricultural workers dwellings as a requirement that they're removed within 3 years if they're not needed. They wanted to turn it into a tourism unit of accommodation. I think we had concerns about visual impact in that space. It's quite an isolated site. It wasn't a particularly high quality tourism offer in particular, and the inspector agreed with us on that, so that was dismissed. And then lastly, erection of 1 self-build at Highfield View. This is one that off Mill Lane in Wedmore. So this is a committee decision. So this was one where someone sought a self-build along Mill Lane, sort of a slightly outlying part of sort of Wedmore, not within the main built-up part, sort of on the top of the hill wall, as you come in from the Mudgley Sand direction. And there was only about 3 other properties next to it. There were some other properties further down the road. So our recommendation was to refuse. I think it was quite an interesting debate. The committee refused it, and the inspector agreed with the dismissal, with the refusal in that case. So that's the end of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that brings the meeting to a close. I thank all members and officers for attending and contributions. Thank you.